So what I'm going to be talking a bit about today is what's been happening in the world of SBOMs. And while we wait for the slides to come up, I'll just basically start to go through a bit of just a quick overview of what an SBOM is for folks, just so we have a clear understanding of what I'm talking about. And then I want to talk a little bit about what's emerging on the regulatory front, as well as a little bit of the things that are sort of the trends that are emerging from those regulatory areas. And then there'll be a little bit of an update for what happened at FOSDEM recently. And so I may probably have missed some things because there's so much happening in the world right now. So if I've missed anything that's regulatory or anything that you guys are aware of that's referencing SBOM, I'd really love it if you guys could come and talk to me afterwards and point me at it so I can keep my notes together and build this up so that we have a bit of a focus of correspondence. So with that, how many people here have heard of what the SBOM and are familiar with the NTIA definitions of an SBOM? Okay, fair number of hands. That's mostly what I'll be starting to talk about here. And key for an SBOM is that it is the relationships between the components used in building software. Components can be source, components can be other things. Relationships are part of the key of it though. And how this stuff all fits together and what the hierarchy is what's sort of going to give you your dependency trees and what's going to give the power of the transparency for actually understanding what you might be vulnerable to. And so I'm mostly using the NTIA guidance at this point. And what I'm doing there is there's some key fields that they've identified as important here. No? Let's go try one more time. And we've got documents that have that. I have a slide that shows them. But it comes down to the supplier, what the component name is, which may be their product, or maybe a library or something like that that's coming out of open source or something. What the version is. Any other unique identifiers. There's a lot of coordinate systems. Naming is a hard problem. So these are the minimum elements. And there's various formats that pretty much cover those today. Most of the two that are most widely used at this point, though, are SPDX and CycloneDX. The SWID has been around since before then, but it's just really only the minimum to get there. Both SPDX and CycloneDX do a lot more. SPDX does a lot more than SBOMs, for one thing. And CycloneDX has different variants as well that are going into different use cases. So one of the key things here is, an SBOM, when do you do it? Well, actually, you do it when you've got the data. You can do it pretty much at any point in the life cycle. And this was one of the things that we've recognized in 2019 or so, 2018, 2019, is anywhere through the software life cycle, you may be having data here. And one of the things that we also picked up about 2 years ago is someone who's doing SBOMs, and like they've been doing that in the licensing space for a long time for legal risk, is looking at different data than the people doing security. And we were having people who were saying, I've got this SBOM for this package. There was this data. I've got this SBOM that I built. Different data. The two weren't the same. People were going, why? So one of the things that we did as a working group under CISA was clarify there's different types of SBOMs out there. And I'm pretty much lining up with this definition for when I've been doing things. You may want to do things before you actually make software, what your dependencies are. You may want to capture that so you can understand and do your reasoning before you actually build something in. You have your source SBOMs, which has the licensing and some of the IP rights and management. Open source projects are pretty much mostly source SBOMs, and then they get used in products and they get built. So you've got your build SBOMs, and then when you actually have your product made, or your component made, you're going to deploy it on something. It's going to run on something. How you configure it to run on something may also expose different vulnerabilities and weaknesses. And so it's important to understand that. And similarly, you may have a full system running, and it's composed of multiple products. And so all of these things have different data associated with them. And you can't go one-to-one, even if you're sort of saying you're thinking this, talking the same thing. So we spent a fair amount of time refining these definitions of the group, probably about 6 to 8 months to come up with these definitions. It's all part of a one-pager, but at the heart of it, the key is just generate the SBOMs when the data is available. And what you also have to do is be able to link one SBOM to another rather than put them all in one big one, so that you can actually figure out, okay, what the traceability is. And you want to sort of keep things modular as much as possible so you don't get this huge explosion of a file, because something like a runtime SBOM is going to change and may look at things differently, but may still point to different deployed SBOMs. Or another one may have changed over time. Like I say, we've got a full DevOps cycle going here. And if we keep things modular, we can actually encompass the DevOps cycle. However, if we do things statically, it's going to be problematic. So there's been a lot of evolution of use of SBOMs. And oops, let's see. That didn't render correctly. Okay, let's try it again. Let's see if it goes up this way now. Let's try it. Okay, not sure what's going on there, but let's just go into this one as here. And then I'll go back to the slideshow. I'm not quite sure why. This is what happens when you do a complicated graph, I guess. So what I was trying to do on this slide is I based it off of something that Bob Martin did. And I kind of liked it because it sort of showed how the ecosystem's been evolving over the last 15 years, roughly. And so we started with, realistically, bill of materials have been done for BSPs for 20, 30 years. Okay? When you're shipping out a board, you're shipping out what the software is, it's been done. Standardizing it started to happen around 2010 with SPDX. And we started to add more use cases into that stack. And then we added more package relationships. We sort of started looking at it's not just a monolithic package. It started because we wanted to share the information with other people who are looking at the same things for licensing. But on the other hand, once you know what's in there, you want to kind of understand. Same point, roughly around 2013, the I Am the Cavalry guys started looking at medical devices and was raising the issues in this area. And when SPDX started focusing on the security use cases back in 2015 and making sure we could do the linkage through CPEs. And then in about 2017, 2018, the NTIA started forming discussions around, okay, how do we start getting the software transparency going at scale? And this was sort of the start of really trying to crisp up a definition of an SBOM that everyone could roughly align around. And then OMG had a 3T SBOM working group, and CycloneDX started showing up then, coming out of dependency track tool. It was the internal format for dependency track, and then it got exported. And so we had three sort of efforts. We were trying to consolidate everything at that point, but we were able to consolidate with the OMG and SPDX, but we were not able to bring in CycloneDX at that time. And so they sort of went and continued to evolve, and we did a merging, and we actually changed all the governance in SPDX so we could merge well with the OMG group. And then we lined up with when the executive order came out, we were pretty much ready for that, because at that point in time, the SPDX 2.2 spec was out there. And it was an ISO standard. We had taken it to ISO in 2020 to 2021, so it's about a year. And 2022, we were trying to figure out, okay, how do we get the minimum viable interoperating? So we had some meetings with the CycloneDX folk from the SPDX. Background here, I'm speaking a little bit more with an SPDX bias here, okay? That's my background. But I have been involved in a lot of these discussions. And then, so we've continued to refine, and we sort of tried to adapt for what was going to work for the OMG guys as well as the SPDX community, and introduce the concept of profiles so people could just focus on what they cared about. And like I say, SBOMs are one set of things that people care about, but people care about other things too. And we're starting to head more and more towards some of the services and so forth. In the parallel, we had the transition from NTIA to DHS. Alan moved over and got a team. And then we've been seeing now a lot of the acts coming in. In particular, the Cyber Resilience Act is making a lot of calls for transparency. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. So what's happening in terms of oops, sorry, I guess I can go back into slideshow mode now. So the expectations for the SBOM usage are starting to emerge on the global scale. Now that it's been out there as a term, people are starting to say, okay, how do I put it in my legislation? How can I expect it? It's good stuff. We need to work with it. How do I go? Well, 2020, we started seeing some of this. There was the IoT Cybersecurity Act that referenced it, and the ENISA guidance for securing Internet of Things in 2020 also was starting to refer to software bill of materials, or variants of that name. And you started seeing that the desire for transparency was showing up in this cybersecurity space in particular. That was really driving it. The executive order that came out really started articulating exactly all the conditions. And then people have been working in the government of the US to align to it. And it also made its way into, it was told that formally NTIA had to define it, so they did another set of efforts that pretty much worked on based on the earlier stakeholder work, as well as a lot of more input from others. And that's the definitions I was showing you at the start. It's from this document here, minimum elements for a software bill of materials. You know, what is the minimum and how do you comply? In June of 2022, the Japan issued their cybersecurity and critical infrastructure guidance. And in there was a nice little Easter egg for us all, which included maintenance and promotion of safety principles. In addition to security, if you're working with critical infrastructure, you need to adhere to the safety guidelines, because it's one thing to fix a bug and then cause more problems. You don't want to do that. And so that has a whole bunch of very interesting, subtle implications for this, and for increased transparency, quite frankly. The other thing that's been emerging is the FDA last year started enforcing the cybersecurity requirements for medical devices. This sometimes gets referred to as a SBOM. And so it pretty much is an SBOM. However, they are starting to look for device and related systems. So it's starting to bring in the hardware aspect that hasn't been there. Okay? And so that's what they're looking for. They're also looking for aspects of support. And so the International Medical Device Regulators Forum basically got together last year and put together a principle and practices of cybersecurity of legacy medical devices to start to guide people towards this area. And one of the things that was really showing up in there is the whole concept of the total life cycle of a product and how to basically look at support. Is it in support? Is it out of life? End of support, end of life? How do you consider it at this point in time? So getting to that stage of what's in support, what's not in support, is starting to show up. Neither SPDX nor CycloneDX really have anything in this right now. And there is a group under OASIS to define EOX support, but it's sort of an element that's sort of missing that the medical people clearly want, and I think a lot of others are going to need it too, especially as we're going forward. So this is a direction, a requirement that's effectively coming in from the regulatory side that's going to need the standards are going to need to adapt to. And then over in Europe, across the channel, we're starting to see a lot of pressure for manufacturers to provide software bill of materials, or at least to keep them for themselves and to understand exactly what they're shipping. And also, you see the theme of support period starting to reflect here as well. So we're getting support period, and we're also getting, expectations that people will track it, and this is going to be backed with a bit of fines and teeth, et cetera. So I think we'll all be paying attention to this, no matter where we are in the world, going forward. So as you can see, there's some requirements that are starting to emerge for the SBOMs as we go forward here. And the use cases that are coming up here are like the cybersecurity risk management, obviously, legal risk management, which has been there for a while. Operations management is starting to happen because people are wanting to put more information in there and track what's actually going on. And then safety analysis and safety profile maintenance. How do we make sure we've got enough information to do the proper analysis? And then we have management of product lines at scale. So how are we going to be dealing with product lines? I'm talking more and more to people who are saying, well, I've got this one SBOM, but how do I keep it going over time? How do I keep managing it? I've got new components coming in. I've got updates going on. I've got a whole series of hardware goes with a whole series of software. This is software engineering product line side. So this is coming in. So some of these needs are, better product support expectations carried with the software. Other things that we've been hearing are the quality of the SBOM data. Different tools are producing different levels of quality. And there's work going on to compare and sort of quantify it. I think Anthony's here in the audience and has got some lovely work that he's been doing recently. He shared at FOSDEM, so the FOSDEM video should be up soon. We're also seeing connecting software with specific hardware and then AI. The models and the data sets used to train the models all have life cycles, as do services, which software may depend on. And so these are all now the ingredients for a system. And we don't have a full way of expanding out before what we've got with this beyond the software right now. So these are all going to be needed for the safety profile, for critical infrastructure and medical devices at least. I suspect otherwise. And another desire is being able to having open frameworks for collecting and sharing the SBOM data with the open source components. These are things that I've seen as trends, and I suspect there's others there too. And like I say, happy to have discussions on this. So one of the things I just want to call your attention to is just over a week ago, the CISL working group put out a guidance on assembling a group of products because there was too many people come asking questions. So this work was started about mid last year, and it was a one-pager, but again, it was a matter of figuring out, okay, how can you start saying this is what you should put together for a product line? And realistically, if you've got products, well, your product is my component, so put a big SBOM on top of it for your system. That's, I think, at the heart of it all. And if you want to read more about that, and there's a document now up on CISL's website. And so, input is welcome. If these people see issues, feel free to join in the discussion. So with this, you can sort of see we're having to evolve from a software bomb to a system bomb. And, products today are made up of components, open and proprietary, and most of the code bases are going to be changing you have to have the mix. You have to handle the mix for both. With SPDX, we took it to be a global standard, and that was a lot of work. But we also made it freely available so that we could be effective with the open source community. No one was going to have to go through a paywall if they didn't want to. And so we are trying to make sure we have things out in the open and globally accessible in this community. And what's been out there today for the last several years is able to comply with the minimum bill of materials. And these are those fields I was talking at the start. And so there's actually checkers for the NTI conformance SBOM definition that are freely available too. So there's really no excuse not to be able to at least check and make sure you can get it syntactically correct. Whether you're getting the fields with the right semantic meanings, a little bit different story, but more and more people are trying to work in this direction. And so when we start to go to the critical systems, more than just the build SBOMs, we really do sometimes need to go down the source SBOMs. If you need to know if an actual file has been included in a build, because it may or may not have a vulnerability, and you don't want to patch what you don't need to. Amnesia 33 showed this to me with Zephyr, in the sense that the only way we could say something was not affected at the time was write a blog post. Now there's VEX, and you'll be hearing more about that in some of the other sessions. There's two projects that I've been working with at the Linux Foundation. One was called Zephyr, and the other one's called Yocto. And both of them have been able to generate SBOMs on the fly for the last 3 years during the build. And both are able to do the source and the build SBOMs. And the Yocto is able to even do the SBOM for the tool chain that you're actually using to do the build, which are things that you're going to need for your medical and your safety side, high assurance. And so like we started talking about the different SBOMs in Zephyr's at Town Hall a couple years ago. The YouTube video is still up there. And then if you want to see, this dashboard is publicly available and has over 500 boards and 9 apps. And every image that's built on there has effectively 3 SBOMs, 2 source, one for the sources of the Zephyr, one for the sources of the app, and a build SBOM that says exactly which files are actually in the image. So this thing is possible. It's possible to get that fidelity, which means we have a way of getting to crispness and coherence that we're going to need for safety eventually. So SPDX3 is going down the security. It's adding the AI and data use cases. It's really refining the security cases because people were wanting to track in the same SBOM what security information is there. So we basically worked with various security experts to bring in that information, as well as, quite frankly, all the build information. How something has been built, what's reproducible. You can now express that if you need to for your use cases. These are all profiles, though, and if you don't need to use it, you don't need to. So you can just basically stick with the software and core or a light version of it, which is the light profile, and go from there. But if you do need to track, this data set has changed over time. Here's what's happened. You have a way now of doing it. And hey, I've got a model, and I've got training data that trains it, and then I've got testing data, and then I've got validation data, and you want to be able to express that, you can do that here. And this is with the relationships with SPDX. So we started working towards 3.0 about 3 or 4 years ago now, and it's just about out the door now. And supporting the security and the safety critical requirements, we're starting to support AI, ML, and data sets, and then the build provenance. These were some of the key ones that we were able to encompass just within the software realm. And we tried to simplify with processes and remove confusing names and so forth. So that should be out there, and we're still working. We're actively working. We've been working actually for a while now on the on 3.1. So we're continuing to refine and get data in from the field people as doing AI. With the big surge in the ChatGPT space and LLMs last year, a lot more focus started coming in on that. There's a lot of focus on physical hardware, but there's not been any on virtual hardware. And software running on virtual hardware needs to be encompassed. So there's a group that works on that, and then the external services group. And we're also looking at trying to make it efficient for operations inside organizations. So there's working groups looking at what we need to do for those use cases, as well as usage on how what the software can be used for. So to go to the safety side, the safety standards, when you actually talk to the safety experts here, they're looking for these requirements here, okay? Most of them are in an SBOM today. However, documentation requirements were missing. And we can use dependencies to actually use the functional safety for a project and actually assemble all the artifacts so that you can start to look at putting together a knowledge graph underneath this for keeping up with the safety, which will also then link into the code and let you basically start to have, when you know there's a vulnerability, understand what the implications are to your safety and potentially track back to your requirements, as well as know which tests you have to rerun. So if people are interested in this topic, there was a very good talk in the FOSDEM Des room a couple days ago. And I would encourage you to go. They'll be posted soon, within the week or next week or two, for those who weren't there in person. The services profile started working last year. If you're interested in this topic, there's a group to go work with. Again, the hardware profile, again, started last year. And they meet every other Friday. And if you're interested, again, come see me, or just Google the mail list and start to look at the coordinates. Operations profile is about to start. We've got a draft that 3 companies have worked on together, and they brought it to this group to say, hey, we want to deal with export control standards and regulatory frameworks, et cetera. And if you, Matthew from ARM is here, and if you catch up with him, he can probably give you more information about it. And so quickly, what's happening with the tooling side of it all, because we can have standards, but unless things are implementing them, they don't show up in the field. There's a taxonomy that came out of CISA. Actually, it was actually from the NTIA side, sorry, it was way back when. And so the toolings were lining up around produce, consume, or transform, with various types within there. There's more information at the SBOM dev room. As you can see, it was a pretty full room and with a pretty good agenda. So I'd encourage you to keep an eye on that and watch some of the videos as they emerge. Another forum for people to collaborate if they want to work on toolings. There's an SBOM Everywhere SIG that meets every other Tuesday at 4 p.m. UK. And these are open forums. Anyone can drop in and join. The other one that I'm involved with is a CISA SBOM tool workstream for tooling and implementation. And we meet every Thursday at 8 p.m. UK time. And this is where, when the problems are emerging in the industry, we can refine it and go forward from there. Oops. And there's another forum that's out there that's open for everyone, which is the Open Chain Reference Tooling Working Group. And you can just basically go and subscribe onto that. And this is a group of folks mostly based out of Europe that are trying to put together a tooling workflow. And they meet twice a month, once in the morning for Asia overlap, and then once in the afternoon. And so they keep track of what's happening, what's emerging, what's current on the new tooling front. And then in the SBX community, we have a tooling implementers call every other week at about 4 p.m. UK time too. So there's plenty of places if you want to learn more about the tooling and so forth, and places to collaborate with the problems and helping to refine things. And if you're aware of any open source or tooling commercial tools that are not listed that can work with SPDX, please let me know. We'd welcome being able to add them to our collection here. And I just want to say thank you to all the SPDX supporters who've given us permission to use their logos that they're supporting SPDX. And with that, I think I'm up to time now. So thank you very much. Go ahead.